Okay, awesome. Thank you, everyone. It's October 11th, 2022. It's the Warren Township High School District 121 Regular School Board meeting. If we could all start by standing up and receiving the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First up is the approval of the agenda. Do we have any changes to the agenda?
Since I wasn't here, I would appreciate removing the approval of regular minutes from last board meeting and have a separate vote on it.
Okay.
That's it.
Else? If not, I move to approve the agenda as amended. Second. Roll call.
Motion by Schultz and second by Anderson. Mr. DeMonte?
Yes.
Mrs. Blair?
Yes.
Mr. Carlson?
Yes.
Mrs. Martinez?
Yes.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Schultz?
Yes.
6 yes, motion carries.
Next up on the agenda is our time for public comment. Visitors are allowed up to 3 minutes to address the Board of Education. If you'd like to address the board, feel free to. Just step up to the podium and state your name and address, and the floor is yours. Got a clear message that we don't need to do that, so we're just going to go on to the consent agenda. I move to approve the consent agenda as amended, which includes personnel recommendations per Exhibit A, number 71 through 74, as posted. There are no Exhibit B personnel recommendations at this time. The payment of bills dated October 11, 2022, in the amount of $1,211,222.52.
Second.
Roll call.
Motion by Schultz, second by Anderson. Mr. Carlson?
Yes.
Mr. DeMonte?
Yes.
Mrs. Blair?
Yes.
Mrs. Martinez?
Yes.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Schultz?
Yes.
Motion carries 6 yes.
Thank you. Next up, I move to approve the regular meeting minutes and executive session minutes of September 27th, 2022.
Second.
Roll call.
Motion by Schultz and second by Anderson. Mr. DeMonte?
Abstain?
Mrs. Blair?
Yes.
Mr. Carlson?
Yes.
Mrs. Martinez?
Yes.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
And Mr. Schultz?
Yes.
I have 5 yes, 1 abstention. Motion carries.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Next up are our 2 action items. The first action item is a disciplinary recommendation for student 2023-02. Is there any further comment or questions on this? If not, I move to approve the disciplinary recommendation for student 2023-02.
Second.
Roll call.
Motion by Schultz and second by Anderson. Mrs. Blair?
Yes.
Mr. Carlson?
Yes.
Mr. DeMonte?
Yes.
Mrs. Martinez?
Yes.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Schultz?
Yes.
6 yes, motion carries.
I move to approve the disciplinary recommendation for student 2023-03.
Second.
Roll call.
Motion by Schultz and second by Anderson. Mr. DeMonte?
Yes.
Mrs. Martinez?
Yes.
Mr. Carlson?
Yes.
Mrs. Blair?
Yes.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Schultz?
Yes.
6 yes, motion carries.
Fantastic. Brings us on to the Committee of a Whole. I move for the Warren Township High School Board of Education to move to the Committee of the Whole for the purpose of this section of the meeting.
Second.
Roll call.
Motion by Schultz and second by Anderson. Mrs. Martinez?
Yes.
Mr. Carlson?
Yes.
Mrs. Blair?
Yes.
Mr. DeMonte?
Yes.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Schultz?
Yes.
6 yes, motion carries.
Thank you, everyone. Brings us up to the Student Committee.
All right, that is Tony and I. So we have 3 topics tonight to focus on. The first one is the curriculum guide. The second is a possible gun violence resolution. And the third is the student handbook. So Chris Geocaris, I think, has a brief presentation. And then we can discuss. Thank you.
So just to provide the board with some updates since last time we talked, So the curriculum guide process is moving along. Last time we talked about some dual credit opportunities. The one class I wasn't sure where that was going to fall in terms of timing was environmental science. So we're actually doing couple new things next year that are the first time it's being done in Lake County. We are the first people to offer dual credit chemistry. So that'll be our honors college general chemistry course that starts next year. We're the first ones to do that, and with CLC, to partner with CLC to do that. And then environmental science, our AP environmental science next year. We did a curriculum analysis of AP environmental science with the Bio 140 from CLC, and they're actually almost identical curriculum-wise. So we're going to be able to provide our students in that class with almost the kind of a three-way go, where they can do just AP, they could do dual credit and not take the AP test and still get college credit, or they could do both of them and decide that they want to do that. So it's a really neat opportunity. So we're kind of working through the last few things of that, but we're going to get that off the ground. And then Tech Academy certifications and Tech Academy Plus will be ready to go for dual credit in that respect. New courses, Honors English 3 and Honors United States History. Those will go for, those will be brought forward to kind of help us out with the automatic accelerated placement. One thing that we'll be discussing with lead teachers, and something I wanted to bring forward to you guys, is that right now we weight our AP courses as a 1.0 bump. So like an A in an AP course is a 5.0, a B is a 4.0, versus a regular college prep class, it's a 4.0 for an A. Our honors courses are weighted with a 0.75 boost. So one of the reasons that was done initially was that AP is an entry-level college course. It's a higher level of rigor than even our honors courses. But as we start to expand dual credit, those are also entry-level college courses. And so one of the things that would like to just kind of start to have some conversations around is that we weight dual credit equivalently to AP. As dual credit continues to expand into some new areas, it's a chance for some kids that might not have accessed AP courses to receive that same benefit, and by enrolling in early college credit coursework. So that's one thing that we're starting to consider. That's something that's more tied to the handbook, is where that kind of lies. So I'm going to start having some conversations with our lead teachers around that over the next couple months. I would love to get perspective from the board as well on that. But that's something that we definitely need to be thinking about moving forward. Next week, I'll be meeting with the lead teachers, similar to what we would do in the past for our curriculum committee. We're going to review some changes. We're going to discuss that grade weighting proposal. We're going to start talking through the impacts of automatic accelerated placement with our lead teachers and how they should be communicating with their courses or with their teachers and their courses in their departments, and then also beginning to kind of train them on what career pathway endorsements are and how that's going to impact our courses and our offerings over time as that moves forward. So that's happening next week on Thursday. Automatic accelerated placement, I'm very grateful for the work of Chuck Maurer and Laura Kirk in helping process through that. We had some participation from a couple of our counselors, Chad Miller and Dan Heupel, to provide a good perspective from student services and the counselor piece on that. So we have our process is almost finalized and how we're doing that. We've begun communicating with feeder districts to get the test scores that we need from our rising freshmen to begin to put those things together. We're finalizing communications that are going to be going out to families as part of the course selection. So after the board approves the curriculum guide in a couple weeks here, all of that information will then be communicated out, and we're just kind of getting ready to make sure we communicate effectively with our teachers, and then communicate effectively with our parents, and then also have some time set aside as we go through it to make sure that course placements and selections are made appropriately.
I have a question.
Yes.
So what is automatic accelerated placement?
So automatic accelerated placement is a new rule from the state that if a student meets or exceeds the grade level benchmark on the most recent state assessment or a locally administered, nationally normed assessment, like for example, a MAP test would be that, then they need to be enrolled automatically into the next most rigorous level in the following year. So if they're in a college prep class, we would enroll them automatically in the next course in the sequence in their honors class. If they're in honors and there's an AP option the following year, they go to AP automatically. Then the families have the option to, in the law, in terms of the law, they say you can have an alternate education program that's more in line with the students' post-secondary goals. So the families can still opt out. So what we're going to be doing is we're collecting all the test scores. We're using fall 8th grade MAP and iReady from the feeder districts for our incoming freshmen. We just administered the STAR test, which is a nationally normed assessment to all of our freshmen. We'll be using that for our freshmen who are going to be rising sophomores. And then our rising juniors, we'll use a PSAT 9, so those are current sophomores. We use the PSAT 9 for placement criteria. And then our rising seniors, our current juniors, will use the PSAT 10. And that will impact course selection in math, English, science, and math, English, science, and social studies. Math and English for 4 years, science and social studies only for freshman through junior, because both of those content areas, when they get to their senior year, there isn't a pathway anymore. It's not sequence. The sequence in science pretty much stops with physics, and then it splinters. The same thing for social studies. It goes through U.S. history, and then it kind of just splinters out based on interest. Natalia?
So how about juniors? How are you assessing them? And I'm only asking because, like, I paid for my daughter to take the PSAT tomorrow. So what about families who don't opt to do that? How are their kids?
We're not
being
using the
assessed?
PSAT for the juniors. We're using the PSAT 10.
Okay.
So the test that they took last April as sophomores, we're using that for the juniors to pick senior classes. Because it's less than ideal, but at the time of the course selection, the test date is only about 4 or 5 months old. And then additionally, we're still allowing teachers to make recommendations. And so when the kids go in to register in Power School, and parents can go help their kids register in Power School, they can look at it, they'll see the course pre-filled, and then they go in to edit the course selection, they'll see the teacher recommendation, they can change that. And then we'll also be following up with an "Are you sure?" email.
And that's done in February, right?
That'll actually happen in January, late December or January, because in February, we have to be done. So we have to have confirmation from families by the time we get out of January, because in February, we shift into sectioning. Yes?
2 questions. For this rookie, tell me what the difference is between honors, AP, and dual credit. Are they subsets of each other, or what is that?
Honors would be a high school level course that's more rigorous than a regular level course. So you have Algebra 2 Trig, then you have Honors Algebra 2 Trig. They're high school level courses. Honors Algebra 2 Trig covers a little bit more, moves a little bit quicker, goes a little bit more in depth, for example.
College.
But does not count for any college credit.
Okay.
AP is advanced placement.
Right.
That's sponsored by, those are courses that we teach curriculum that's established by the College Board.
Okay.
Students take those courses throughout the year. They take take an exam, an end of course exam in May. And if they score a 3, 4, or 5, then they're eligible for college credit depending on what college or university they apply to. Dual credit is courses that are taught, they get high school credit and credit from CLC. So when a student completes a dual credit course, they actually get college credit through CLC on a transcript. There's no end of course assessment. They just have to complete the course at, they believe, a C or better over the course of over the year.
Okay, second question, and this is more personal. It's bothered me for about 50 years. I took AP History in high school. And when I went to Western,
Did they have AP?
they had, yeah, there was some history before 1967. Thank you very much. But in any case, I took AP History in high school, and when I went to Western, they gave us a test to determine whether we would place out of the history, development of civilization, I think they called it at the time, Dev Civ. But anyway, and Dev Civ was prehistoric, if you will, in Middle Ages and modern. And they asked 3 questions, and I answered all 3 modern because that was the freshest in my mind. As a result, I only got credit for 1/3 of the year instead of all 3. I guess my question, and I don't want to waste the board's time with I already am, but do the kids get coached on how to do that? I mean, if I had known that, I would have answered all 3 questions. Nobody told me.
It depends on, no, I don't think anybody's coaching kids on how to take a placement test at a college.
Why not?
because we can't control for all the different types of questions and things. So for AP exams, the kids will take those classes, say they pass the United States history exam, and they go to a college and they pass it, right? And one college might say, great, that counts for this US history class. Another college will say, great, that's great, that counts for this US history class. Or if they pass AP language and composition, one college, they might go to a college, one college will say, great, that counts as an English credit. And they can go to another college and they say, that's great, that's an elective. You still have to take an English class with us. So that's one thing that with AP, there's some inconsistency amongst colleges and universities and how they administer the credit within their institutions. Whereas with dual credit, it's a little bit more portable since you have a transcript from CLC.
Sealed.
And there's times where it doesn't transfer, like nothing's perfect, nothing's 100%, but it is a little bit cleaner in some cases with dual credit.
How many students does each counselor have?
Each counselor is probably around 325, 400, 350, right?
And is each counselor responsible for checking the test scores, depending on your grade and how you're placed along
No.
with the teacher?
What, for automatic replacement?
Yeah.
We will be doing that administratively. It's too much data for, to expect counselors to go through, so Laura Kirk, Chuck Maurer, myself, Peter Cupfer, Matt Jones will be putting that data pool together. And then Chuck and Laura will batch enroll kids based on test scores.
They're weighted the same as regular level? That's correct? And you're considering the dual
Oh,
credit?
dual credit?
Going up.
Currently, they're weighted the same as honors.
As honors, okay.
So right now, if you got an A in a dual credit class, that'd be a 4.75. But to me, there's some inconsistency with that when we're saying AP is this level of rigor. This is a college level course. Well, so is dual credit honors language and composition. That is a college level course that is just as rigorous. We should be awarding that. And also, like, even within AP, there are some AP courses that are more rigorous than other AP courses. So that's, to me, like, if our baseline for a 5.0 is this is early college credit, then any course that we offer that's early college credit should receive that kids should receive that benefit.
I was looking online today, and a lot of schools have it at 0.5 above, but then their honors are also lower. So their AP is
And because,
one.
and that's one of the things that happens with colleges now. A lot of colleges disregard weighted GPAs a lot of times now for entrance requirements. It helps with some things, but because some schools will weight AP at 1.5 and honors at 1, or they'll weight AP at 1 and honors at 0.75 like we do. Like, schools do it differently, or 0.5 and 1.0. It just kind of depends, and since there's so much inconsistency with it, a lot of colleges will just ask for a simple GPA, which is an unweighted one.
So real quick, one thing that's really important for families that we need to continue coaching, to Mr. Carlson's point, is we do have, Mr. Carlson, we do have a college and career counselor at each school, and they do run some seminars and informational sessions for families. And some of those are, hey, here's how you do post-secondary education. Here's how you get ready for college. Here's how you get into college, and here's how. So some of that coaching might happen there in those cases. Another thing that's really important for families to recognize is because the colleges take all of these weights differently, sometimes the most important thing when you're looking at which courses to take and do you want to take weighted courses, a really important thing families can do is call the specific colleges or universities that they're considering and say, what's your weighted grade policy? What are your entrance counselors taking into consideration? Because it's kind of different depending on where you are in the country right now. Sorry, Mr. Devonte.
So by virtue of the fact that you're bringing it here to us, I feel like there's something I'm missing, meaning what's the counter argument? My mind just goes to, it's being brought here for discussion for probably a reason. So there must be a counter argument against doing it then the same, and if so, what is that?
Counter argument.
And not from you, from someone else.
Right, a counter argument could be, well, AP is more rigorous. AP requires kids to sit and take one test on one day. Other than that, like, it's what we've always done. I think AP is an institution that has established itself as being like this echelon of like academic excellence, and I think dual credit is something that has begun to gain traction as when we talk about career pathways and, you know, increasing access to early college credit for our students. I think it's important that we consider that.
Yeah, I would, yeah, part of this is the way that we've always done things includes the perspective of staff who have been teaching these courses for a long time. And so a lot of times there's concern that if we offer other classes that might compete with our current classes, sometimes people take that as maybe the board or the district not valuing their work, which isn't an intention, but might be an unintended consequence.
And the reality is, because I think sometimes there's a feeling of competition amongst, like, these dual credit classes will compete with AP. And in reality, dual credit will expand in areas that AP has voids, is kind of where this ends up going, where we don't have AP technology courses, but now we have dual credit technology courses. So it's a different pathway into early college credit. Something that we haven't discussed before, which is why, you know, I just wanted to bring it forward with you, and then I'm also going to talk about it with lead teachers, kind of get their perspective on things. Because I think as we kind of just continue on, if we want our kids to access and challenge themselves, one of the things that we have that we can reward kids with is GPA bumps. And I don't think that's necessarily going to, I don't think that's going to necessarily result in kids taking dual credit versus AP, because we're not necessarily always offering dual credit and AP in competition with one another.
Not to beat this to death, but I'm going to try. How many kids graduate from here every year?
Right around 1,000, 970, I think, last year.
Okay, and how many of those 970 go to college?
About 80% right now is our college.
Something go to college, and of those 700, I bet you 100 go to Northern, and 85 go to Illinois, and 55 go to Western, et cetera, et cetera. So I can understand how a counselor cannot do individual counseling, but could you look into something like, okay, guys, everybody's going to Illinois, come meet us Thursday afternoon?
They do,
You know.
they do a lot of senior seminars. Our counselors do a lot of senior seminars to work with students over the course of the year. One thing that our counselors do as well at the start of their senior years, we work with kids in our English classes to write college admissions essays. And they do a lot of activities throughout the year at night for some financial aid, but also during the day with seniors on their lunch break to, like, talk about here's what you need to do if you're interested in these types of schools. Here's what you need to do to get ready to go to these types of schools.
Looking more specific, I'm looking at a seminar for everybody going to Illinois. Western or whatever, and you can't have one for Southwest Texas State Teachers College, but you could have one for where you have a lump of students, you could cover a lot of things with an hour talk, I would
A lot of those colleges do come in and meet with kids that are interested that are going to their schools. We do have, like, I will definitely share that feedback with our student services department, but we do have representatives from colleges come in and meet with our students, and they're here for the entire, like, the whole day, and they give kids the opportunity to come in and ask questions. They tell a little bit about the school and, like, types of academic programs and what kids need to do to apply, and that sort of thing. But I'll definitely share that feedback with our post-secondary counselors.
Good on that topic? Okay. I just have a curiosity question about the AP, the automatic placement. If students opt out, they have to show that it's not aligned with their college goals? Is that the
No,
sense?
it's the language of the law. We want to make sure that our kids are able to select the courses that they want to select. So we're going to pre-enroll kids, still allow students to have the option to pick courses that are aligned with what they are interested in taking, what they want to do, be able to use the teacher recommendation also as a point of reference, and then we'll verify with families that this is after they've selected courses. This is what your final course selection looks like. Are you sure this is the course that you want for your son or daughter next year?
Sounds automatic, sounds kind of scary to me. I'd be like, what? And it can be stressful.
It is stressful.
Some
I
kids
think
do
the
not
end.
want AP.
The end result is we will see more kids in higher levels of courses. I think the Honors English 3 and the Honors United States History are great opportunities for our students to challenge themselves. That would have been normally in English 3 and United States History. Now we'll have some more kids that are accessing the honors level, which will pay dividends for them their senior year, which means we'll have more kids ready to take dual credit English perhaps than we've had in the past.
Thank you.
Welcome.
We are moving on to the discussion for the resolution, the gun violence resolution. Dr. Weisman, would you share progress?
Yeah, so I appreciate that. I did put together a draft resolution that I think that the board has in their agenda. If you got a chance to look at that, that's great. If not, really I think the draft resolution is a combination of what was in Deerfields and Highland Parks, high level. I did remove a handful of items there to try to make it as specific as possible. And then added in the whereas clauses, and then added a couple items in the numbered resolution section based on what I think some community members have said would be of interest to them. And so this is a draft and intended for conversation right now. Generally, right now, the resolution demands action, references medical organization, and then has a handful of different requests that include things like banning semi-automatic guns, penalties for straw buyers, strengthen universal background checks. There's some funding requests in there for things like mental health in schools and threat assessments in schools. Yeah, I think probably also then it closes by saying that the board will continue to advocate for this in this area, which is probably an important part of the conversation. In addition to the resolution, really, I think the question is, does the board want to continue to advocate? But open up for feedback. It's your resolution. This is just meant to be a starting point for the conversation.
Did anyone who reviewed this find anything lacking or anything?
I did not, I looked at it, but I'm not seeing the other documents from other schools. But if we've, taken bits and pieces from other boards who've done similar things, it certainly seems comprehensive to me. I don't know what else you would add. I can't think of anything, but.
I was in the same boat.
Comment?
Yeah.
At the risk of universal condemnation. I learned a long time ago, don't ask for what you can't get. Don't ask for something impossible. We're a school board. Now, everything from 11 to 15, I think is just wonderful. I'm sure most of you have that in front of you. We are not going to get anybody, for example, to ban the use, manufacture, purchase, sale, possession of semi-automatic weapons. Not going to happen. There are 300 million guns, I don't know the numbers, but approximately 300 million guns in this country. Probably half of them are semi-automatic, pistols particularly. It's not going to happen. Don't ask for what is impossible. It dilutes your effort. Okay? Number 7. Enact legislation mandating safe storage of firearms as a condition for firearms ownership. Number 1, how are you going to make that happen? It's unenforceable. It's impossible. Don't ask for it.
So I guess from my perspective, I see it as a direction or a belief. Yeah, more than an actual request. Sure, in a perfect world, it would be awesome if all of these things came together. But if we can make any progress on any number of them,
My point exactly.
then, yeah.
And if you want, and I've been on the other side of lobbyists, if you will, you want to call them that. And, I mean, if you come with this to a state legislator, they're going to pat you on the head and say, have a nice day. Because even they don't have the power to do all of this. Okay? I would heartily suggest, and whatever happens here, believe me, I'm fully on board with all of this, but whatever happens, I would like to see something much more coherent that has to do with schools, that we can do, that affects our students in terms of prevention, mental health prevention, that sort of thing. I'd like to see it much leaner and meaner and more possible, because it's much more effective when you go to a legislator with something like that than with a laundry list of things that are wonderful, but there's no way in heck they can do. I'm just suggesting you're hurting your cause by asking for too much.
I guess my perspective is, I understand that completely. My perspective is, when you say, don't ask for the impossible, my response usually is, why not?
Yeah, me
Someone
too.
has to ask for the impossible. But we're not saying we're going to the state Congress or senators saying, do all these things. We're saying, this is what we'd like to see in our maybe unrealistic world. If there's bits and pieces of this that we'd say, let's move forward with and really attack, then we can do bits and pieces. I mean, we're not suggesting that, the state of Illinois adopts all these. I see this as more as, this is what we believe in.
Maybe a preamble along those lines? This is a belief rather than a legislative initiative? Because if it's a legislative initiative, you're wasting your time.
I don't see this as a legislative initiative. I see it more as, this is what we believe in as a school board and as a school district.
And we're not the only ones, obviously, if we're collectively taking bits and pieces, there's other districts who have the same beliefs and are going to present the same items.
The other piece of this, Steve, is we don't want to isolate ourselves and only have a document that's good for the district. We want something that involves other pieces of the community. So we want to work across with the township and work with the village and work with the police and work with the different mental health care workers out in the community and potentially partner versus,
Obviously, I'm alone in this, but I will support this, but I just speak from experience. When you ask for too much, it's much less effective than if you ask for something that is in your wheelhouse. That's the last time I'll say it.
Thank you, Steve.
appreciate the opinion.
Yeah, I think probably what would be helpful for us as an administration right now is to know, I can make any edits to this, we can shorten it, we can lengthen it, but then what do you want us to do with it? So do you want us to partner with because we've got the number 15 there is we'll continue to advocate for and support measures. So we don't have to answer that question now, but if you have ideas now, it might be good to talk through, or, in the coming months, or maybe just in the future, some type of direction or for me. What do you want me to do with it? Because I think a whole lot of school districts will put these out there, throw it out there, and then they'll forget about it. And that's kind of the cycle that we're in with gun violence in schools right now. And if we're not going to continue to fall in that cycle, then we have to do something after the resolution.
I see two possible courses with this. One would be nice to bring it to our local police department and say, hey, this is what we're thinking of putting together. Do you guys have any edits to it from your perspective? And then it's number 15, we're going to continue to advocate. This is where, I'm really hearing Steve loud and clear. Okay, is there an issue or two that we feel extremely passionate about as a school or a district, as a board? Well, let's pick that issue or two and pursue that one, not the whole list and not the unattainable. I'd like to think that maybe the 7 of us can do something about, semi-automatic, weapons. That's not going to happen. But there probably is something we can do at a local level. I mean, change starts somewhere, so why not here?
Take 11 and 13 and go to your state legislators and say, this is what we want.
There we go. So those are my thoughts.
I'm good.
Well, I think 15, given the current parent
Sure,
groups that
that's our
are
intention.
active. Pardon?
That's our intention, yeah.
And then identifying students. I mean, I think as far as education, giving kids opportunities, giving them counseling, identifying issues. I think there's a lot that the school can do, but I think there's a lot that requires the community.
Okay, maybe here's a compromise. We look at this with two lenses. One is we ask Danny to come up with a list of things that we can do, period. We need as a school district. The other is overarching principles that we support. How's that?
Might be repeating what you just said, but we're asking Danny to come up with a list of things that he thinks we can impact.
right? That are-
And then I would say,
That are in our wheelhouse,
yeah.
if you will.
But then I would ask the board to come up with items at the same time, what's important to us? Because that might be a,
That's the larger issue. That's-
yeah, that might be a subset of
What
what
do we
he puts
believe?
together, and we need to figure out as a board, what do we believe in?
What do we-
And it might be 5 things, but let's prioritize what's most actionable or most important to work on first.
What do we believe in? That's one thing. What we can do.
Right.
Is something else.
Absolutely. That's what I'm saying. Let's figure out what we can actually work on.
Okay.
So there could be an entirely different format for this document. We looked at were all lists, but there's no reason it has to be written exactly in a list format. So our goal then for next board meeting, or, I hate to push this out too far, but if we want to prioritize, if we want to go individually and report back, how would you do this?
No, I don't think we have
Just
to delay this at all. I think this is fine as is. Maybe get some, get some other input into it. But what you want to act on specifically as a school board is outside of this document. It all comes under number 15. What do we want to do as a school board? Okay, this is this is a resolution. Now let's talk about action items behind that. That's not part of the resolution. What are our action items?
Good, basically as is,
Correct.
and then we'll focus on, we can discuss which ones we want to focus on, because that'll be a larger issue anyway, because you have to have action items and plans and.
What is are we ultimately going to vote on this resolution? Is that the idea?
That is the idea that ultimately,
We do with it, we just post it, do we send it out? What's the next step then once we agree that this is a good document for us?
initially, if you're looking at me, initially I would say it's definitely some type of press release, but then you also use it as the first step to sit down with other people. The conversation today was a little bit about, should we sit down with the police department? Yeah, we definitely should sit down with the police department. This allows the administration to have clear.
What about the village, like the
The
mayor?
village, yeah, the village, the township, local legislators, state legislators allows us to say, here's our charge. We want to make sure that legislators understand your perspective, and we're calling on them to do certain things, it's out of our domain, but we also then separately, as a follow-up, hey, this is what we're calling on you to do, this is what we're doing. Here's our action.
My comment about calling out the police and the village is a good idea. It would be to see if they would have any recommendations to the change of the resolution first. And then based on that, then go ahead and send it out to them again. That way they're part of the process.
Just,
I'll support this, I'll vote for this, on the provision that we look at each individual item here and possibly some other items and subdivide as to this goes to the Gurnee Police Department, this goes to the state legislators, this goes to the other thing. We need action items that specify which one of these, this one we might want to call Brad Schneider and say ban semi-automatic weapons. He'll say, yes, fine, done. That's as far as it's going to go. But if we put this out as these are what we believe, that's fine. But then we need action items specifically by agency as to which ones we're going to do and subset what we're going to do.
Yep.
I don't think you're necessarily all alone. There are there's a couple of these that I may not be totally on board with. I don't know. I tend to, what's that?
Not important. I mean, we don't have to go through these one by one.
Not right now, but yeah, I also,
Trying not to do that, but yeah. I hear
no,
you.
no. And we could, and we can get at the heart of why, but I also, I think a strong statement, resolution is good. I also like to keep things in the wheelhouse in which we're chartered to do. So our main goal is to educate kids. So maybe some of these are really more closely aligned to that. Something like safe gun storage, very firmly should that be a police department. They're the subject matter experts, and there's some pretty strong programs that maybe Gurnee and Lake County may already support, and possibly then we just offer some parent education events on those and just sponsor them and kind of drive how do I say this, attention to those programs, because that's one way that we can support those. So I think it's good to take a strong stand. I'm glad Kathy took lead and brought this here, and I do think we need to like she said, I think we do need to come out, but there's, it's hard to find someone, there's a couple of these that I may not be totally in agreement with, but certainly the concept of it makes sense to me. And we would remove the footnotes, I would hope, as well, at some point.
That's good.
So I feel like if we pull in, if other organizations take the lead on some of these, which I'm in total agreement they should, the safe storage probably fits better with the police, but we have access to the students. The students aren't driving to the police department, so we have to say, as a board and as a district, are we willing to have that as part of an assembly, or bring in parents, or send home literature, or what's our piece of it? So I feel like everything here has a little bit to do with every piece of society. It's kind of messy. We can contribute in a lot of small ways, and they can contribute in larger ways, and some we would take the lead on. So I think it's a good start.
Absolutely.
I think I've got some good direction moving forward, and I think it's we'll put it on the agenda for later this month, probably.
I'm always in favor for assemblies. I always feel that assemblies are,
Unifying,
yeah,
aren't
they're
they?
unifying, and they get you pumped up to do, work together, and
Sometimes go home and tell their parents about them.
yeah, they do.
Sometimes. If they're that good. All right, I think we covered everything under that. Does anybody have anything to add?
Forward.
All right, student parent handbook is the final topic. Dr. Keeley. Oh, you're gonna jump in?
Jumping from here, yeah.
Perfect.
Just real quick, we do student parent handbook work every year. Our timeline generally is that in January, we'll bring in a parent advisory group. In February, we'll start looking at that administratively. I do want to bring in an equity team. We had some really concrete equity work that was happening a couple years ago, and a team that's worked on that. And so I talked with the team about bringing some of those people back in to look at our handbook just from an equity perspective. And then usually in the spring, probably around April, we're bringing handbook priorities back, or handbook changes to the board. Because we meet with the parent advisory team before the formal committee of the whole meets again, we wanted to bring this to you. We probably wouldn't, without direction from you, bring a whole lot of major changes. There's always going to be some legislative changes. We're always going to go through it and make some minor updates based on how the year went. But if there are specific things in the student handbook that you would like us to look at, it'd be great to priorities are, so we can start doing some work to prep for that. Yeah.
Would structure of fees be in that student handbook?
Fees is in the handbook right now,
Okay,
correct.
Because I'm going to say that I still feel very strongly about the kids who don't get to participate in dances because of past due fees. And at some point, I would like to have a collective conversation to allow them to attend high school experiences that they're entitled to. Things that are out of their control because their parents, right, that their parents haven't paid for whatever reasons. I think Tony and I had touched base one time on you worry more about that, like 5% above the kids who are waivers, right?
I call them the cusp kids,
Yeah.
the cusp families.
Right.
Yeah.
That to me is still a big deal to me, that I really want us to be able to do something positive in that area.
Great, and it'd be great to talk about. We can talk about that now, if people are open to talking about that now. We can talk about it anytime between now and January too, but this is a good kind of kickoff for that, definitely.
Any other incentive for kids to pay fees?
Collections, probably, like if we don't collect the fees while they're in school, then I assume we send them to.
They don't get a transcript, well, they wouldn't get a transcript, an official transcript when they graduate.
Mostly it would probably be like the big stick is we would send their family, the parents to a collection agency after they graduate.
How often do we do that?
For those that don't. Graduating seniors, I should say.
Okay.
These are events that cost money, Natalia?
Right, well, it's like homecoming and prom, but what holds them back is that they have student fees. So I know that in past, because our student fees were so high, I could see that that was happening. I don't know, where we fall this year with the fees being lower, but if we could come to some middle ground, that works for the district and works for the student to be able to attend, that's really what I'm looking to have the conversation on. I understand that we still have to hold them accountable for something, but it's holding the parent accountable, but it's the piece of the student not being able to participate in something that they should be able to experience.
There's a negative impact on the student for something their parents are not doing.
Yeah, I think the problem you get into too is that they're, the students are negatively impacted, but that is the one thing that sends the kid home to harangue the parents to pay.
Right.
And then they don't, then that's the problem, obviously, but I'm sure we get some collections about prom time. We
Yeah,
get some
right.
payments.
Yeah, definitely.
So I mean, I don't know if we look at, say, I don't know if we even still do winter formal, but say homecoming, allow the kids homecoming, and once you get to the senior or junior prom, then we push a little bit. I don't know. I mean, I would like a middle ground. I would like somehow for this to change.
Maybe something that graduates and starts out easy and gets tough.
I know that we had our attorneys review it. The attorney said that it's kind of like a gray area, right, from the director from ISB. The way I understand it and the way that with other colleagues in school districts, this was supposed to have stopped several years ago. Warren's policy hasn't changed. Again, I understand that the attorney's reading it in his, how they're reading it. There's a lot of gray area to it, but if we can make something good out of this for them, that's what I'm looking for.
So other districts just let it go?
Yeah, so if it's anything that has to do with a negative impact to any kind of school participation, right? So whether it's a dance or stuff like that, yeah, you can't be held, so the student can't be detained from not attending because their parents weren't able to pay a fee, because their parents' account, it's not the student's account, it's the parent account who has a past due balance. It doesn't fall on the student's responsibility, it falls on the parent's responsibility. Unfortunately, what's happening is that the student is getting the brunt of the problem, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure you're right that there are school districts that either waive the fee or allow students to attend.
Well, you're not waiving the
I'm
fee,
sure.
you're sending them to collections at the end of the school
Sure,
year, and
yeah.
then if they graduate, they still have a balance, then you're sending them to collections every year, and then once graduation comes, you don't give them an official transcript.
I'm sure, I believe that happens. I don't know either way if more schools do it one way or another, and we could definitely do some research on that and find out where everybody else is at on that.
How much money are we talking about?
The fee with unpaid fees or the cost of the prom tickets?
So in previous years, it was a lot more expensive. You were looking at $500. Now we're looking at $200. So I'm going to imagine that going forward, hopefully more families are able to pay that $200 versus in previous years when they were paying for $500. but Mike can answer that.
Yeah, previous years, last year's.
I mean, how much are we talking about total? If the kids, if the
Unpaid
kids that aren't
fees.
going to pay don't pay, how much will we lose?
How much are we sending to?
$130,000 a year we end up sending to collections.
Correct.
That's just the seniors.
That's just, yeah, that's seniors. That's over 4 years of,
Whatever.
And how much of that do we collect once it's sent to collection?
about 40%.
And you collected just on seniors, or you collected on,
When they go to collections, it's just that graduating.
right, no, when, say like when prom comes up and then the parents are finally calling to make a payment because their student can't purchase that ticket, what's the percentage roughly do you think that we're collecting on?
Was that during prom time, you said?
Prom is
30-40% during prom
correct. All
time.
of a sudden, you start seeing, you know, prior year fees being paid.
It's
as
because
well.
I have something brewing in my head here. I didn't realize we sent 100% of parents to collections.
It's not 100%.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Those that are graduating seniors?
Yes.
Okay, that still owe.
Yes.
We send a collection.
Yeah, that's what I meant. So a part of me says, why not just let them do it anyway if we're going to send them to collections regardless? Like, in my head, it's like, maybe we're overthinking this. Like, you're going to go to, that's the stick. Like, you're going to go to collections regardless. Maybe whether they actually pay the prom fee or not is irrelevant. I mean, we want the money, they should. It's not fair to all the families that work hard to pay. I get all that. We still encourage the heck out of it, try to support the ones that need the support, the cusp people. We have a process for those who fall under free and reduced lunch status.
Yeah, but it's that little piece
Yeah.
above that really are the ones that end up.
Yeah, I don't know, maybe there's an internal way to have another tier or something, but if we're just sending 100% to, maybe there's something in there.
Tougher on parents.
Yeah, I do hope, I think Natalia's right, I'm very curious, so maybe we're even jumping the gun, maybe it's wait a year to find out what, now that we reduce the fees, what those numbers are. Maybe we just don't have, maybe it's much smaller this year and we just don't know yet.
I will say, during fees, the $200 went really well compared to prior years that where everybody was signing up for a payment plan. I'm just, I
Yeah.
was there for,
Sure.
and at the 200, they are on a payment.
So what about with athletics? I know that for athletics, so you have the cost, right, and you have to make the payment by a certain date, otherwise your student can't participate in athletics. So, but there's no one that falls in between the cracks where they're adding on registration fee and athletics. So basically, it's just the past dues are all flat out registration fee.
Are they paying for them separately?
Yeah, if you're participating in athletics.
Right, you have to pay it. You have to pay it,
you're not
otherwise you can't,
participating
okay.
at all. Yeah.
Go to school.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's what offsets the piece that,
Tony, I understand your perspective. The only thing I might do differently is, if we're going to send them to collections anyways, I'd still say, you know what? You still have to pay for prom. You don't have to pay everything else, but you at least have to pay for prom. Otherwise, we're sending a message, you don't have to pay. Don't worry
no,
about it.
I'm not saying you don't
No,
have
no,
to
no,
pay
no, I'm
for
not- I'm not
dance
s-
fees.
Okay, no, that's what I interpreted from Tony.
Yeah, and don't mistake, I'm just throwing an idea out there, I'm not endorsing the idea.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, that's not my preferred
Yeah, okay.
method.
I'm not saying.
I'm
that
saying,
if-
yeah, there's
because
different
if
ways
the
to go about
prom
this.
costs $95 per ticket, that you're not paying the $95 to go.
Right.
I'm saying if you owe $400 in past due registration fees,
Yeah.
still let the student purchase the $95 prom ticket
Got
to
it.
go and attend and enjoy themselves with the right that they have to go to prom.
That's what I want to clarify. That's what I
Yes,
thought. I just want to make
yes.
sure everybody was clear
Or
on that.
homecoming, pay the $50
Yeah.
for homecoming ticket and go and enjoy yourself for the evening.
And on an ongoing basis, warn and let the parents know, hey, we're going to send you a collection. And do it sooner rather than later.
I think we can
send
plenty of
out-
notification on
Yeah, we
that.
send out monthly statements.
Okay. Well then,
So homecoming, students missed homecoming this year because of
Yes.
unpaid? Not
Students actually miss. We do have, yeah.
Came to me and said, is there anything that you can do for me, Mrs. Martinez? And I said, you have to call the district. You have to have your parents sign up for a payment plan. Now, whether the handful did that or not, I don't know.
Right.
But I did have a handful, just because my child's in the district, that they
Yep.
know, that they were like, hey, what can I do? Or what happened? And one of the kids actually said to me, I almost feel like we're broke, my parents are broke, and they just don't want to tell me. That's what the student said to me, and it's like, I don't know what to tell you, but these are the steps that you can have your parents do to help you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. That's the right message.
Pardon?
That's what you can do, and you just did.
So this is something we'd have to settle for the next handbook? I mean, it's not changing this year.
You could change it this year if you want to.
We wouldn't recommend you change something like this mid-year, but the board definitely has a prerogative to do that.
I've been trying to talk about this issue for a year. I'd like,
I don't see why you couldn't
I'd like a
change it this year if they, you don't have to give them a full, go free, but you could say, okay, if you make any kind of payment before prom, you can buy the prom ticket, but if you sit there and just do nothing, or, I don't know, that could be a compromise. I'm just trying to say, give them an opportunity to do something, but without giving them, because if this is our main collection avenue, which I agree, it sucks. I agree. It's the students being punished for the parents, and I don't like that either. But I don't know, I hate to give up on the whole process all at once. And maybe we could do a partial thing this year and then look at it for next year for a complete change. I don't know.
so what happened, but what about, like, say, next year, are we having winter formal? No, I don't know.
The only,
Okay, so let's just say homecoming and prom. So homecoming, would it be the same thing, like, hey, put X amount, or just let them buy the ticket, and then those who get to junior, senior year for prom, have them, you say, if your family can make X amount towards your registration fee, then we will open up your account to make the ticket purchase.
5% of your fee has to be paid, you have to make something, and then a prom half has to be paid, or something like that, because some students might have 2 or 3 years of outstanding, let's call it.
I mean, honestly, I'm gonna be honest, I would say homecoming, just let it be. Prom, we could set a percentage or an amount depending on where the student falls as a compromise.
Is that hard to track? Is that a lot of
Student
work?
would be completely different,
Yeah.
yeah, so, but, I mean,
So,
it's gonna be.
Well, what happens is the student's gonna go on to purchase their ticket online, and if they didn't upload into RevTrack, right, their student ID to purchase, the student's gonna go on, or the parent's gonna go on, and it's gonna say, student not found. And it's gonna say, if it's student not found, the instructions is call the business office. They're gonna call the business office, and that's when they're gonna find out, or email that says, hey, you owe $500 of registration fees, that's why that's the reason why you can't purchase your prom ticket, right? Then that's the opportunity they have to say, with that said, if you sign up for a payment plan now, or if you pay $100 right now towards this, we'll open your slot to purchase your ticket.
a lot of phone calls, I would imagine.
That whole week or two is just crazy, to be quite honest, but yeah.
But
Right.
that's if they still want to collect money. Otherwise, you just let the student buy their ticket and let them attend, and we, on our side, just continue to try to collect. So it all falls on how much work do you want to do? I mean, like, if we want to keep trying to collect during that period, then yeah, you're going to have to deal with the calls, you're going to have to deal with the emails, you're going to have to deal with the heavy load of impact during, those 5 weeks or 4 weeks. Otherwise, let it go and let them purchase the ticket.
the perspective, that all is true. The perspective of the administration has traditionally been, like today I shadowed office professionals one of them was the bookkeeper, and she has about 100 students that are on a payment plan. She said most of those came as a result of homecoming for this year, about 100 students. So if we've got students with 200, if we got, let's just say they're freshmen, they each owe $200. That's about 20 grand that we are able to collect because those families are being pushed into a payment plan. We can collect that money. If you put that, if you say, well, let's say we got 100 or so kids out of both campuses, that's a body. So that I think that from the counter perspective is, hey, we're always trying to figure out how we can get more people in here to help. So it's not just a question, it's not just a matter of, are we pulling kids out of the experiences that they want to have in high school? It's what are we willing to trade? So are we willing to trade that income and therefore the position that would go along with that?
But if
for
we're
that
not going to
experience?
trade all of the income, that's why, everyone, I mean, his staff needs to realize that, yeah, it's going to be a heavy hitter for a couple weeks. But with the incentive that we're going to allow these students to be able to participate by calling in and making sure that we're collecting 25% of what their, what their full balance is, or whatever was decided, if we don't just let them slide and get the ticket, right? I mean, like you said, there has to be a compromise, there has to be something.
Homecoming's before prom. How about you let them slide on homecoming, but you make sure that they know it, and that if they don't pay up by prom, they can't go to prom.
That's what I said earlier.
Here's the hard part. Usually you have
Sorry.
freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors
Thought it was
showing up to
mine.
homecoming. Typically for prom, you have juniors have some accumulated debts, and so it becomes a big obstacle at that certain point in time because you have multiple years of outstanding.
Right, and that's what we've talked about too.
Dr. Weisman. $540.
So I feel like definitely everybody's seen a nod when I said I could go just kind of see what is happening in surrounding communities. And it sounds like maybe we could put our heads together and brainstorm a few options that the board could then more tangibly look at and then start saying like, I'm not comfortable with that option. Some board members might say, I like it how it is. But if we've got kind of a current state and maybe one or two options, then that might help conversation moving forward.
This year would be our baseline.
Plan.
Okay. Operations?
Okay, now to the boring stuff. All right, so we have two major topics, which would be the levy and budgeting, and then all of the facility projects. But they're all kind of tied together because we have to understand how we're spending our money and how much money we have to spend over and above what our day-to-day operational expenses will be. And I think that's one of the things that we're going to have to know at some point is if we did nothing next year, not nothing, but if everybody got the raises, but we didn't add any bodies, how much of that new income would be left over next year after that? I mean, is it going to be?
We hired nobody and just, because we already did the reduced fees, so that's a
Right.
portion of it. So
Understood.
we have about $10.5 million of additional money coming in just from referendum money.
Right, but we have more money coming in from other sources as well. So I want to know the actual number of money we have over our expenses if we did just, no additional bodies, no nothing, just so you could see what it is. That way you could say, well, that is, next year we'll have a total of, well, like you say, 10 million there, but, with the 5% and the CPI and the evidence-based funding increase and blah, 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 we maybe have 11 or 12 million.
I would say almost 13.
So we'd have 13 million. So that's our baseline going into next year, that we would have above our expenses without adding anything that comes out of the strategic plan, because budgeting for next year is going to be a little difficult until we know exactly what the impact is going to be of additions of employees and psychological help and whatever we can get accomplished for next year, which seems like it's a long way off, but there's not that much time really to decide what you're going to do next year. So I think that's understanding that let's just, for ballpark numbers, we say we got 13 million that we have that's over and above, just existing operations that we have today. So now we say, okay, what are we going to do with the levy? So you have to levy it in a certain way. So we have to know how much we're going to put into, staffing and expenses for, implementing the plans that we have for additional social emotional help, because everything else is still going to be there. The athletics is going to be there. Everything is going to be back. So we're not taking that out. So if we're going to spend another $1 million, can we get that done? Do we want to spend $2 million? There has to be you have to start, you don't have to know how much money it is up front, but you have to have some idea of what you're going to spend on that.
What your budget is.
And then you could back down into, well, this much is left over. We want to put, let's say that's 8 million. Okay, there's 8 million left over after we do all the things we want to do. Then maybe 4 million goes into fund balance. And then 4 million could go into fixing up the buildings and facilities work and things of that nature. Because that money will come in next year again, so, blah, 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 blah. But, so I think there's there's so many things wrapped around this, but I think the levy process is what everybody needs to know, is how much money are we going to put in operations and the ed fund to facilitate improvements we're going to make next year.
Because when we levy, part of the levy process is asking the county telling the county which buckets you want to
Put the money
levy
in,
money
right.
Yeah.
So I think that's, and the recommended amount of money that we have in our fund balance is 35%? So 40%, so we're now at roughly, I don't know,
About 45 at the peak.
at the peak, but at the bottom, we're at 20%
Oh,
or
it's
10%
low, yeah.
or whatever. So is our goal to have the 40% at the bottom?
That would be the minimum fund balance throughout the peaks. Or we can use it as an average. It does not state within the board policy.
So, anyway, we need to add money to that to get the bottom number, which is in May. We need to add monies to that for at least 2 or 3 years, I'd say, to bring that back up to a respectable number at the bottom, so we don't ever have to worry about making the tax anticipation warrants and things of that nature.
Is that on top of the 25% threshold that we're supposed to keep?
That's the same.
That's the same. Okay.
25% at max dollars, but we're not over it at minimum dollars when we get to whatever's 10 million or whatever we have left in late April, early May, before the money starts rolling back in again, so.
It doesn't apply, feel free, but does any of this have anything to do with what it costs us to borrow money and our rating and that sort of thing?
Our fund balance to ratio, it affects our bond ratings if we were to,
About refi.
it would be the same thing, it would be another bond issuance if we were to refi.
So we'd have to have the rating as high as we want to make that cost as low as we want.
You got it, that's the name of the game.
Yeah, so we're gonna build that back up for sure. I mean, that's one of the things we're gonna do.
That's why you're
Right.
talking about
Right.
increasing the fund balance.
Right,
Okay, thank you.
yeah. So I guess that, I don't know I think we know about what it is, so we know we're gonna have somewhere in the 13 million range, but I have no idea how much we're gonna put into the ed fund. But it can't be over 3 or 4 million, we know that, so. But we don't have to spend it all 1 year either.
Correct.
Because it can go into the ed fund, and then the ed fund will build up, so you have more money later, too. So I think but it's just a matter, the one that really matters is kind of the facilities, right? Because that's actual work we're gonna do. Actual spending. So that money's gonna go out no matter what. So in your board docs, there is a list of the projects, and there's a whole listing of them, and actual a recommendation, say, well, you could do it in this fashion, with $1 million for this roof, this, you know, blah, 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 and on down through all the things we've already looked at. So I think there's more than enough money to tackle the 3.9 million or whatever per year that we're going to average through this process. And the thing that's interesting to me is the old plane roof too is also in there, which we basically have that money already. We borrowed that money already.
We borrowed that money, but I think we need to kind of pay ourselves back, don't we?
We'll just move it. We just gotta move it in June. Yeah, but we'll move it, it'll be there, and, you know, I mean, it's not that it impacts everything, I mean, obviously, it comes out of the same bucket, but.
Can I ask a question on timelines? Like, I'm seeing summer 2023. Knowing staffing shortages, supply chain issues, having to get architects involved and going to bid and all that, and then thinking about other conversations where you've so eloquently put when we actually get the money, which isn't until fall. I'm hearing a lot of people have to go into a pre-purchasing state just to ensure equipment to do work next summer. Is next summer even realistic from staffing, supply chains, availability of money in in that?
I would say right now for roofing projects, definitely. I talked to Chuck Crowley. You have to be able to give a little bit more flexibility as far as timing. It may not be exactly at the start of summer. We may have to put a window in from May through like September for them to get work done and have things on site
Right.
before they start. But roofing, as far as HVAC, I would say absolutely not.
Yeah, because
It's
I've
not
been
gonna
hearing about chillers not even arriving this
some-
season
Yep.
and stuff like that from other places. You're
When speaking to Train, a lot of the HVAC items themselves were 12 months all the way up to
Correct.
almost 3 years.
That's what I'm hearing.
Depending on some of the larger pieces of equipment.
And I'm also hearing in some cases, things are not even expected to be in all of 2023, depending on what you're ordering. Anyway, I guess the reason I brought that up is there a reality component here? Does someone need to splash water in our face and say, yeah, like as much as you want to do it, you know, is it going to be hard to do?
I think for FY '23, it's going to be much more challenging, but I think the bigger picture is start putting money into buildings and grounds, even if it sits there for a year and is available the next.
Levy it,
round.
or
Yes.
the whole point of the yeah. Either way, we're gonna levy that money, gotcha, because it needs to be there, yeah. Okay.
Levy the money into the right buckets,
Yep.
starting
Yep.
with the 23-24 school year.
Yep.
And then and if you can do the roofs this summer, then let's start on the roofs.
Yep.
If there's anything else that we like on the list, I mean, there's nothing on the list that I see that I would necessarily take off. They all look to be things that need to be done, a lot of them for safety, a lot of them for just the longevity of the building and so on. I don't know if there's any of those other things that could happen. Renovate bathrooms, you know, just any of those things that, you know, you could do, I think would be, can't get the stuff, you can't get the stuff.
Right,
I agree with you, Tony. A lot of it, you have to be mobilized and
that's correct.
Evaluate this list based on possibility within a certain timeline or not?
Well, everything just slides out.
Yeah,
I mean, it
it's
just slides
pushed.
out. Because nothing is gonna be any more, I don't think there's anything that's in the next year that would be any more doable this year than,
You know who's gonna know that is whoever our construction person is,
Yeah.
because they're the one, whoever our general contractor, construction company who's our go-to for that. They already know right now what they're getting and not getting and what the lead times are from their vendors, so they should.
point.
But I think that's what you're asking, is maybe through the lens of that. I don't know. It doesn't change the levying process, which I'm in full agreement with what you're saying, so maybe it doesn't matter, but.
I would feel slow coming, but it's done.
Okay, well, I think, is everybody okay with the general process of, we can do what we can do, and then everything else just slides out, and we'll just try to be more prepared for the summer of '24 then?
Right.
To do more things. The other big thing that's on here that we haven't talked about yet is the the locker room at Eau Plaine, which is, you know, it says 6.5 million, which, like I say, that was probably a long time ago, so.
Yes,
So that's that money is gonna be at least 15 to 20% higher, I mean, without even thinking about it, you know, so. It's maybe 30% or 40, whatever, it doesn't matter, but I think that's another one of those that maybe we accrue money over a period of time and then just do that.
Seems to me that's a project, that project deserves some kind of tiered, multi-year phase, correct. So you almost want to target, it may not be the pretty stuff, but it may be the behind-the-scenes piping or whatever, year one, because you're not gonna tear off all the new whatever. And so maybe there's a phased approach possibly, instead of lumping it all into one.
Part of that conversation that Dr. Weisman and I were talking about was, for the locker room, kind of redoing it, is waiting on the parking lots until that locker room's done, because you're gonna be tearing up the locker, or the.
Yeah, I
and
don't wanna
then
redo
do it.
work.
Exactly. There's certain chronological orders to get stuff done, and in a way that would make sense. Like, we wouldn't do the parking lots until after the roofing project, because you have cranes and everything else up there.
Small tangent. Thank you for patching that hole at the Eau Plaine pull-in. That has been, that gaping crater has been there for years. And we all of us that drop off kids have bottomed out on that. Anyway, that's an aside. Thank you, whoever did that. And if you've ever gone in that lot, you know what I'm talking about.
It's gonna be a whole separate building, it's gonna stand on next to the school, because the locker room is in the basement of Eau Plaine.
I got toured.
Yeah, that's really nice. So, but to build the whole building, it has to be, you know, a structure that has all the safety and fire stuff and all that stuff, and I agree with you, it sounds like a lot of money.
If I'm Joe taxpayer, I'm looking at this thinking, boom.
Well, everybody plays over here we haven't put any money into those tennis courts anyway. We expanded the tennis courts over here, doubled the number of courts 2-3 years ago. Somewhat in anticipation that this is where the locker rooms could go. I mean, the original plan had, you know, the locker rooms going out there and then a pool coming off of that and blah, 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 you know, but, you know, that's a whole separate nightmare.
One more question. if I
Yeah.
could. This is deferred. I'd like to see one added to this. That's security system, both schools.
Security system?
Some sort of hardening of this school, both schools, in terms of, we've talked about it, and we're gonna hire a consultant to come up with suggestions of that sort of thing. I'd like
Yeah,
to
I think
see-
there'll be things that will come from that will get
That needs to be
woven
added
in
to
here.
this list
Yes,
is all I'm
yes,
saying.
absolutely.
Yeah, this list is not static.
Right, and it's a matter of, you know, there may be recommendation requires a person to be more attentive to the security system itself, so you know when an alarm goes off or something. I mean,
Whatever it is.
We have something in place already from what Chris has told us previously?
well, there's some things in place, but we don't know when someone opens a door, we don't know when this happens. I mean, there's,
Can I interject some of the stuff we might not want to say in open session?
Right.
Only because we're giving away our,
security protocol.
yeah, any kind of security, I mean, we may,
our security concerns.
maybe we table that to closed, or at the end of the meeting, we go into closed or something like that. So I just want to be careful of not giving away.
There's always security updates that we can make, and we can get more specific about that, and I think the consultant coming in will help with that. I think from Dr. Engel and I's perspective, what we're looking for is just a general, what will help us is knowing whether or not there is a general commitment to over multiple years funding buildings and grounds, because that will allow us to put together a longer-term facility plan.
I think absolutely, we're all kind of cognizant that we've been delaying a lot of maintenance around the buildings. John, you brought up one project that I was thinking of, the pool. What's the story with the pool? It's gonna have a hole in it pretty soon, isn't it?
He's looking at me. Do you want me to share
Well,
my
I don't,
opinion?
yeah, what, is the pool going worse than normal? Is it ready to go out, or? It's always bad, I know, but I mean.
Yeah, but I thought, I mean, last time when we were talking about the new gym, at the same time, we were talking about a pool, because that was in pretty dire situation at the same time. I would thought it would be on the plan here somewhere that we have to either fix it, replace it, move it, do something with it too.
That's a great question. When we went through the deferred maintenance lists, we prioritized everything, and the pool and the auditorium they're all the way down in priority 4. We would love to have it. It would be great to update it, but we just prioritize things above it. It's significant costs. It's like $50 million if you throw them both in there together. Probably back in 2019, it's probably more now. That's just not on. That's not our initial. We got to fix this list.
Right, yeah, no, you need to move it, yeah. Because part of the expense of moving it is then you have to renovate that area where the pool is now and turn that back into usable space of some
Right.
description.
Yeah.
Which would require a lot of work in that space as well, so that's.
Yeah, very, yeah, I'm good that it's been delayed or deferred for a long time.
Yeah.
So,
The other thing that I think that I wanted to say about, because there's other things that we've talked about, like the turf on the football field, and there's other things, but if there are things we could do this summer that are maybe farther down the list, but just because the timing, maybe there's a way to shuffle things around a little bit that are just doable, you know, but, I don't,
Definitely.
right, right.
We're ready if people might not feel like they need it, but does anybody need us to talk through the levy process? Can we at least run through the timeline so everybody knows what the timeline is for?
Sure.
Levy that we're going to go through. Basically, the board at that time is going to approve a resolution estimating the aggregate levy for tax year '22. On November the 2nd, we're going to post the notice of public hearing, no more than 14 days, but less than 7 days from the hearing. And then at the November 15th board meeting, we'll have the public hearing. We are asking in excess of 5%. A lot of that has to do with the referendum money that's coming in, would put us over a 5% cap. And then we would be asking to adopt the, I should say, 2022 tax levy, including all appropriate resolutions. Here's what we're going to be asking for. This is the levy breakdown. This is the request. This is not the get. The ed fund, $50 million, in O&M at 9.25, transportation at $3 million, working cash at $50,000. IMRF at 750, Social Security at 750,000, fire prevention and safety at 0, tort immunity at 675, special education and leasing both at $500,000. So the total levy request is $65,475,000. On the actual certificate of levy, it will also include the IMRF on behalf of CEDAW. So that was $120,000. So to give you guys an idea, last year, you can see the education column right there for the education fund. The levy was $35.8 million. We're going to be requesting $50 million in the ed fund this year, which is inclusive of the $13.4 million from the referendum. And we're going to ask for a little bit more in case there's any new growth or anything that comes in. With the 5% CPI, and also there's kind of like a little bit of redistribution amongst the other funds, we're looking at getting that from 4 million to 9.25 ask. It's not going to be the 9.25 full, but we're going to ask for that amount. We should be right around the mid to low 8s coming back in. And to give you a little bit of history, in prior years, if we go back, this is all the way back to about 2008, 2009, it's buildings and grounds has been a consistent $6.5 million levy each and every year. So if we can kind of get back to that. So here's the estimated, we're assuming $25 million new growth. I know that seems high. Prior years has been as low as 6 and as high as 8 or 9. If we go back to 2018, you can see what the levy ask was at $49,350,000. We received a little bit over 43, almost 43.5 million. Then the next year we asked for 48.8, we're at 44.6. 2020 we asked for 49.5, we ended up at 45.8. And then last year we asked for 49.5 almost again and ended up 46.911. And this year we're asking for 65,475. And I will.
Expect to get what?
We expect to get the 13.42 plus the about $2.5 million worth of CPI and plus any new growth on top of that. So realistically, we're going to be right around, I would say, 61-ish and change. It just depends on, the one factor I don't know yet is that this is a quadrennial reassessment year on how that's going to play out yet. That's the one thing I don't know. And we
Mr. Anderson, you had also asked us to have already the treasurer's report graphs. I don't know if you're good. Okay. Any other questions on the levy?
No.
Okay.
You have enough guidance on the maintenance of facilities and stuff to move forward? Okay. All done then.
Done. On to the stakeholders committee.
So we have 3 topics today for the stakeholder committee. The 3 topics are strategic planning, student voice on the board, and the school board, and the IASB, which is the Illinois Association of School Boards resolutions. Dr. Weissman offered to give another update on strategic planning after our last board meeting. Do you want to take a minute or two and go ahead and present that?
So really briefly, it seemed like the direction from the board as a whole was to try to get as many voices into the planning process before we meet initially with a planning team that has representatives from the different stakeholder groups. So what I'm looking at here is just go ahead and I have met with some student groups already to make sure that that's a group it seemed like the board wanted to make sure we included. So I would go ahead and, if this looks okay, set dates and start getting out invitations and create a process for giving these groups some voice and input into a visioning process. Basically, our major stakeholder groups, our employees, our students, and our families would get 2 opportunities to provide input. And then we'd follow that up with having a planning team that could try to mush that together. We'd have a steering team that has 1 representative from most of those groups, but has 4 different students. Let's see, that would meet with me monthly as we're going through the process to make sure that everybody's on board with the steps we're taking and the resources we're providing people. And then at the end, we'd have that planning team come in and try to put all that information together before we bring it back to the board for approval. So if that generally looks like an okay timeline, I'm going to start a more intense kind of prep for that.
So does that, the timeline looks fine to me. I mean, are you going to try to make recommendations for additional employees for next year out of this process? Or is that going to be done it has to be done in advance of certainly April?
Yes, some of the things that, it's probably going to be a phased approach, I would say. So if we're looking at visioning, I would say it's going to take us a couple years to get to whatever this plan comes up with. But there are, at the same time, I think there are definitely going to be staff or positions that we've taken away that are obviously add backs that, I mean, tonight, if we wanted to talk generally about those, you could probably guess what some of those are going to be because we've pulled back in the last 3 to 4 years. So that'll probably be our initial ask is, hey, to reinstate some services that we haven't yet been able to reinstate or specific supports, here's what we would need. And then when we get through with this, we'll be able to go out into the future.
Would anyone on the board be interested in participating in the steering team? Or do we want Dr. D to pick? Voluntarily or involuntarily?
Probably Mr. Schultz. I'd have Mr. Schultz pick.
Glad to volunteered.
If that generally looks like an okay outline, I'll move forward with that. If any board members have community leaders or family members that they'd like us to put in the hat for that.
I gave you a name
Yep,
already.
yep, I've got a name. And some of you did give me names for people to meet with that I've been meeting with during here
So Paul said he'll volunteer?
Told I was volunteered gladly.
All right, then I'll volunteer too.
He said, Paul was volunteered to pick the person, I think is what he said.
gonna be part of it.
I thought I was voluntold to be it.
You are, okay.
I meant you would pick the people.
Ah, okay.
All right, so let's clarify, what are we doing?
Phew.
Yeah,
Yeah.
All those in favor?
I didn't know I had an option.
We're already past that point. You're already, so you're halfway there.
There we go. Yeah.
That's all I need, thank you.
and then we're good with Dr. Weissman finalizing dates for us?
Yep.
Okay. All right, the next topic that I wanted to discuss was student voice on the board. So this conversation is about student voice, and right now we do have a policy about students being part of our school board meetings, but we haven't been able to follow that for quite some time. I think this is the perfect opportunity for us to discuss and possibly bring this policy back and bring back 2 representatives to the board from each campus. I think this is a great opportunity for us to
One from each campus. Well, you could change it to 2 from each campus, but right now it says 2 students,
so
1
it's-
from
it's-
each campus.
Okay, so it's not
That's-
2 from each campus?
That's what it says on the policy. That's all I'm saying. It doesn't,
Yeah, I think you're right. I think I may have been wrong in the past. It's 2 total, 1 from each campus.
Okay.
I apologize. Yep,
we
yep.
had them for many, many years when I was first came on the board. They sat in every meeting. They actually had
I mean, I don't think that
seat at the
necessarily they
table.
have to be at every meeting, but at one meeting, or even
I'm
if
just
it
saying
was
that's what they
like,
did. I mean, it doesn't matter. We can do it any way that everybody wants to do it. I'm not,
yeah, I mean, I think
Discontinue.
it's a great time to
Yeah.
bring that back, reinstate
sure.
that voice. It's important to have their feedback and their perspective. They're the ones walking the hallways every day.
It would have been very interesting to hear what they had to say.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that would have been great.
A student volunteers for this, or they would be selected? How would that work?
I'm not quite sure. I don't know if it would be through like the student council president. I mean, what would be the structure? What's been,
Great question. So right now, the principals have what they call Principal Executive Leadership Group, and they're representatives from the different leadership organizations, because we not only have student council, we've got FBLA, Students of Service, we've got a handful of different culturally responsive groups, so they pull leaders from that group and meet with them as a leadership team. I think they just met last week with that team, for example. So probably we would look for interested individuals from that entity, because that entity represents a handful of different groups.
The leadership team elect one of their peers?
They could, yep. Somehow using that leadership team, I think definitely makes sense.
I'd like to see them come at least once a quarter and on the same night as their counterpart.
so it's one for each campus, but we couldn't have more?
Yeah, you definitely could. The policy just states, really is what the policy is doing, is telling me I have to do at least this. But if you'd like to have additional, you definitely could do that and just ask me to do it.
Now, could we have a student in each demographic category join? So there's different perspectives and diversity?
Yeah, I'd have to think through exactly how to do that. You definitely, we need diversity with that voice. I think that's important for the board to have, yeah. And I think that executive leadership group is pretty diverse. I think they'd be a good group to pull from. So I'm hearing at least once a quarter. Are there specific things that, so if I'm talking to a group of students, what am I telling them that they're doing when they come?
Giving us their perspective, their voice. I mean, I think
Example
it's
about the
simple.
discussion we had about the prom
Yeah.
and the fees.
I mean,
They
just
could
letting
have
them
some
know
input.
that, there's all sorts of topics, but, their input, their perspective, their view.
Would they bring a topic?
Yeah, they could bring a topic, yeah.
But we actually, with this new structure, like if they would attend the committee of the whole meetings,
Yeah,
they lend themselves really well. Because
Yeah.
usually one of the items in each one of these three committees is probably more meaningful to a student. And if it's already open concept, then rather than a kind of just a formality kind of board meeting, which is no fun for anyone. But these conversations could be, I don't know, I think those are the meetings where the kids could be really
So have them
powerful.
participate in the committee of whole.
Yeah, in fact, maybe,
Once a quarter, I'd say every one of them.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And maybe they want to divide themselves out and have one attached to each committee if they so chose. I'm just kind of throwing that
Yeah.
out there, but there are ways to structure it to where, I don't know, we get their involvement, like you said.
They could, I mean, some of the things they did in the past too was they would come in and say, talk about what was going on their campus a little bit. If there was something going on that was noteworthy, like we're getting ready for homecoming, or we're getting ready for this, or whatever the case may be. So that was always part of the student representatives that we've had in the past.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's important just to have them be able to come in and be part of our discussions, or like you said, if there's anything that's important going on their end, for them to give us an insight to what's going on at the building and making it, just bringing us closer.
It's great. So I have a meeting tomorrow, Thursday. I have a meeting Thursday after school with one of the student leaders from that executive council. And I'll go ahead and start brainstorming some of this with them, and we'll put together a plan.
So does it have to be the same student all year long, or can they rotate it as they see fit and get a bigger variety of students? I think if we said, let's get one from every demographic at every meeting, it might be too overwhelming. But let the leadership council, the students say, hey, you know what? We've got, I'm just making numbers, 4 of us that would like to do this, and they just rotate in every fourth meeting. And that way they can have one at every one of these types of meetings. And then they can report back amongst themselves.
That is if you go.
Or maybe we just ask how much commitment do they want to give us? Like, what's their level
good
of
point.
commitment? Yeah, what their preference is. Let them pick.
And you could always rotate to have one on the board and one in the audience too, so you're not missing out.
There's definitely going to probably be some prep need for us. Like, as leaders, we're going to have to help them prep and understand different perspectives before they come to the meeting, so that they feel confident that they can speak to any of the issues happening. Yeah. Okay.
All right, so the last topic is resolutions for the Illinois Association of School Boards. So every year, the Illinois Association of School Boards has to decide how they want to prioritize their advocacy efforts on behalf of the Illinois school boards. They ask school boards to vote on these priorities through these proposed resolutions. My understanding is the resolutions can be submitted by any school board. The Illinois Association of School Boards puts together a review committee that makes recommendations. We can choose to vote to support or to support each resolution, regardless of the review of the committee's recommendations. So forth with that. what would be the board's priorities for like, we could look at what are the board's priorities for lobbying legislative influence? Are we okay with adapting recommendations of the review committee? Are there any specific resolutions board members want to discuss tonight or at the next meeting? And do we want to consider submitting resolutions in the future? So I know that was a mouthful, but,
Followed it completely.
right.
So my suggestions on following their suggestions or not, I'd say let's just read the recommendations that are attached. And at the next, we have another meeting before November. Let's, at that point, talk and say, does anybody have an opinion different than the recommendations? So that way, we're not discussing every recommendation, so we're just discussing where we might have a difference. Because we might find that we all agree with it, and it could be a very short conversation that way.
For what it's worth, I did read them, and there were two I disagreed with the committee on, so there will be a,
Okay?
a conversation there.
Couple of them, too.
Yep, I didn't agree with the committee on two of them, so, I mean, there's definitely a little discussion there if,
So
You're
if you could do
voting.
us a favor, then if you've read it thoroughly and you've got a few that you'd like to have a conversation out, if you could just email the board or email Danny, that way we know to study those ones a little bit more closely, so we can be more engaged in the conversation.
yeah, I can give you the
That'd
two
be
of the
great.
rationale, and then you probably,
Yeah.
you may even match.
Yeah, so send it to Danny, and then he'll distribute them back out to us.
So you're going to email?
Yeah, because I'm not ever emailing all of you because of Open Meetings Act, so I will
Yeah.
email him, who will
Yeah,
email
yeah.
us, and none of us will respond and reply all, so. Yep, I will email him.
Good, well, thanks for the nice discussion. That's all that we have today for the Stakeholders Committee.
Thank you very much, Natalia. Anything else from any of the committees?
Yeah.
Talking roofing. They did open up the project maintenance grant for FY '23. There's
Anything else? Then I move to adjourn the committee of the whole and reconvene the regular meeting.
Second.
Roll call.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
I move to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Roll call.
Motion by Schultz and second by Carl.
Yes.
Mr. Demonte.
Yes.
Mr. Anderson.
Yes.
Mrs. Blair.
Yes.
Mr. Carlson. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Motion carries.
Thank you, everyone, very much for your work tonight. Be safe, be healthy.
Good discussions.